Welcome to Season 5 of AIHA's podcast series, The Healthier Workplaces Show, where we explore timely and informative topics about occupational and environmental health and safety. I'm your host, Alejandro Castillo. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with AIHA Connect 2026 Closing Speaker Tom Koulopoulos. Tom is chairman and founder of Delphi Group, a 30-year-old Boston-based think tank named one of the fastest-growing private companies by Inc. magazine, and the founding partner of Acrovantage Ventures, which invests in early-stage technology startups. He's also the author of 14 books, an inventor with several patents, the past executive director of the Babson College Center for Business Innovation, the past director of the Dell Innovation Lab, and a professor at Boston University. Tom's 14 books include Reimagining Healthcare, Revealing the Invisible, and the Gen Z Effect. His latest book, Gigatrends, looks at the 6 tech trends that are shaping the future of how we live, work, and play. Today, we'll explore Tom's insight on how AI, data, and digital transformation can be harnessed to create healthier, safer workplaces.
The Connect 2026 closing keynote is sponsored by TES.
Tom, thank you for joining us today.
Alejandro, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Let's get started. As the closing keynote speaker for AIHA Connect 2026, what excites you the most about speaking to professionals who are specialized in creating healthier, safer workplaces?
What excites me about this audience is that they get it. These are professionals that don't debate whether work affects health. I mean, they know it, they live it day in, day out. So it's their reality every single day. They're not chasing trends for the sake of novelty, right? They're trying to protect people, ensure people's safety, while the ground is shifting under their feet. And that's what I really want to focus on, is that there's so much change, there's so much noise today about AI and how it's going to change the world. And a lot of it is hyperbolic, a lot of it is fear-based. And I want to give folks a practical and hopeful way to look at industrial hygiene and what it means in this new age of AI. And what I love about speaking to this community is that I think they sit at a unique sort of crossroads, right? They understand the systems, they understand the regulatory issues, but they also understand human behavior. And safety is a lot about behavior. It's not just about policy and procedure and regulation. It's about human behavior. And they get the consequences of that. So in a future where work is changing faster than the rules can keep up, that combination of skills that they bring to the forefront to ensure safety in a very uncertain world, that's part of what I'm looking forward to sharing with these folks and why I'm looking forward to being at the event.
Yeah, absolutely. In your latest book, Gigatrends, you outline the major technological forces reshaping society. Can you share with me what these major technological forces are and which of these gigatrends you believe will mostly directly impact worker health, safety, and well-being over the next decade?
Yeah, so we cover a lot in the book. I mean, this was a fun book to write, because we looked at those trends that are going to, and we call them gigatrends because they're going to shape the future of billions of people. There go the word giga in the title. There's so much here at play. The first thing that I think which applies to this audience is this notion of automation and autonomy. We talk a lot in the book about autonomous devices, not just the advent of AI per se, LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT, which we've all become familiar with, but autonomous devices, robots, autonomous vehicles. These are going to become part of the landscape very, very quickly. So we're moving from tools that just assist humans to systems that act independently, that have agency. So I'm going to talk a fair amount about this notion of agentic AI and how agentic AI in the form of a humanoid robot or a robotic companion, I think it's going to become an essential part of how they navigate the future. Because these devices will act independently, right? They'll make decisions, they'll have agency to make decisions. You give them a goal, and then they'll pursue that goal. So we'll talk a bit about that. What's important about this is that it alters the notion of accountability, right? So if these devices have situational awareness, then they will make decisions that will have a cascading effect. So think about that and the impact that has on safety in industrial settings. One decision can have enormous implications downstream. So I think we're going to have to look very carefully at how we set goals and guardrails for these agentic autonomous devices. So that's one of the trends we talk about in the book that we'll definitely focus on. The other is this notion of, we call it hyper dematerialization. It's really datafying the world. The world is becoming increasingly data driven. So we'll talk about how we how work is going to be measured and monitored and optimized in entirely new ways. And that will improve safety, there's no doubt. But it's also going to increase the pressure on us because it's going to reveal more of the issues that could be safety problems. So suddenly we have this device that will be able to audit our organization in ways that we simply have not been able to. And it brings up all kinds of interesting issues about surveillance and, does this surveillance create a greater cognitive overload on the part of both the professional managing safety as well as the individuals whose safety we're trying to protect? So a lot to be unpacked there on this notion of datafication. The last trend, and one of the most significant, the first one we talk about in the book, is the demographic shift happening globally. I know you have a global audience at this event. This is not a US trend. This is global. We are aging as a global population, and that creates all kinds of interesting safety issues. First of all, we're going to have 5 or 6 generations all working together in the same environment, and that creates obvious friction and all kinds of bridges that we're going to have to cross between generational attitudes and approaches to safety and how they want to experience the workforce and the work environment. But an aging workforce alongside a younger workforce creates a lot of very different expectations about flexibility and mental health and purpose and like I said, how they define safety and what does safety mean to them and how do they deal with uncertainty and with safety issues. So put together, we talk about all those forces and some others as well. I think we're going to have a very rich conversation around how the landscape is changing and how this profession is going to have to keep up with this very quickly changing landscape, the demographics, the datafication, and the automation and autonomy of agentic devices. A lot to unpack there, right?
No, absolutely. I think you're right. The landscape is absolutely changing. As workplaces become more digitized and automated, what new or invisible hazards should IH and OHS professionals be paying attention to right now?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so much to talk about here, right? I mean, some of the most dangerous hazards ahead aren't going to show up on a checklist. I think they're going to sort of reveal themselves over time. But let me touch on a few of them. So the first one I'm seeing, this is really important. It sounds soft and fuzzy, but I think it has a lot of relevance to this audience. I call it cognitive fatigue. It's when you get to the point of decision overload. There's so much to consider when it comes to occupational safety and industrial safety and industrial hygiene. And that's only going to multiply. It's going to increase. As I said, when we have these new devices in place and the datafication of the organization, more of those concerns will be revealed. So a lot of cognitive fatigue can result in trying to manage that. What I'm going to try to focus on is how AI can help us with that cognitive fatigue. How can it do more of the tedious stuff? So I'll bet, now, I don't know your group as well as you know them, but I'll bet that a lot of them spend a great deal of their time in administrative stuff, tedium, spreadsheets, filling out forms and working with systems that are just very tedious to work with. If I could remove all of that, how much more effective would these folks be in what they're doing? And I think the answer is much more effective because they would do more of what they're capable of doing, more of what they love to do, more of what actually has an impact, because the spreadsheets don't have an impact. The tedium has to be done, but it doesn't have an impact on safety. It's part of what we do because we have to do it to ensure safety. But if AI could do all that for you, how would that relieve your cognitive fatigue and allow you to do more of what your real core competency is, which is being creative, being innovative in how you help keep organizations and people safe. And I think what folks fully don't understand is the degree and the burden of this cognitive overhead as we move forward in a more complex, more uncertain world. So automated systems will be able to mitigate that tedium and as a result, reduce risk and increase safety. The other piece of this, which I want to touch on, is what I call algorithmic risk. So systems are going to start making decisions based on assumptions that are baked into data. And those assumptions, they're rarely neutral. So how do we imbue values into these systems so that they make decisions the way a professional would make the same decisions? And I think increasingly we're going to hold these systems to standards that are very human standards. Are they following our values? Are they aligned with our values? And I think a big part of that is going to be how we determine, how we imbue those values into these agentic systems. I think the irony with all of this is that, AI might make work look safer on paper, but it can also create a lot of risk if we don't manage it correctly. So I want to help folks pay attention to these invisible layers of AI and how we can create collaborators, partners that we work with that help us to alleviate the tedium, do more of what we love to do, what we're best at, and what most ensures the safety of the workers that we're responsible for, while at the same time giving a sort of license and latitude to trust these systems to do what they're supposed to do. So again, a lot there to unpack, but we're going to try to peel away some of those layers and look at how we can use AI as a collaborator and a partner to help us do more of what we love, more of what we should be doing.
Absolutely. When I think of AI, I think of how there's good and bad data that's being used. How
Right.
can someone become more literate in using AI and making sure they're using correct data?
Wow, that's a great question. So one of the best ways to become literate on AI is to use AI as your tutor. So ask AI the questions that you need answered to make you more capable and more adept at AI. And I think what people unfortunately have become accustomed to is sort of the Google model of just using AI to answer a question. Use it to challenge you. Use it as an educator. Use it as a vehicle by which you can ramp up your own skill set in AI. Ask it to build a curriculum for you that's suited to your preferences, to the things that you most want to understand and most want to ramp up your education on. So use AI as a collaborative tool to help you better educate yourself on some of these trends, and to challenge AI. To challenge it the way you would challenge a protege. If you're bringing someone on board and you're apprenticing them, you would challenge them. You would ask them to think twice about the answers that they give you. You would ask them why they're doing what they're doing. Do the same thing with AI. Challenge it, push it, and by getting into a conversation with it in that manner, you start to get a sense for where it's weak, where it's strong, where it can help you, where it may have biases, where you may need to be careful of the advice it's giving, but enter into a conversation with it. Don't use it just as a tool by which you can ask questions, but a tool through which you can have an intense and deep conversation.
Advanced registration for AIHA Connect 2026 is officially open, and we're heading to one of America's most vibrant cities, New Orleans. Advanced registration is open through March 29th, 2026. Register now for the best rates.
In your book, Reimagining Healthcare, you describe a shift toward predictive and preventative care. How might better integration of workplace exposure data improve long-term worker health while still respecting privacy?
Yeah, confidentiality is huge, right? And privacy is a big issue when we talk about not just healthcare, but of course the impact that AI will have on healthcare. So in Reimagining Healthcare in the book, I argue that the future of health isn't reactive, it's anticipatory. So even beyond proactive, because proactive implies that we're doing things in a more forward-thinking way, but anticipatory is actually going beyond what's happening next to what happens after what happens next. So it's really looking forward to the future and trying to anticipate needs of an individual, of a patient. So when we look at workforce exposure data, when it's aggregated and anonymized properly, which is a big if, but when that's done properly, it can be incredibly powerful. I mean, it allows us to spot patterns in population health or in an organization's industrial health, however you want to measure this, on however large of a canvas you want to measure it, rather. It allows us to spot patterns early. And I've seen this in healthcare. I've worked in healthcare extensively. Population health data is one of the best indicators of my risk as an individual. So if you think about this in an industrial sense, if I identify patterns that represent within my industrial population certain indicators that allow me to anticipate a problem well before that problem occurs, I can spot that pattern early, then I can potentially prevent illness. I can perform a diagnosis before the diagnosis even needs a treatment. Or I can predict the potential of some kind of a disability or an injury. And these sound far-fetched. It sounds like we're talking Minority Report, but we're really not. because in industrial settings, we look at behavioral patterns, people's physical behaviors, the way that their emotional behaviors, and we can identify based on that where there is risk. And then we can then take action to alleviate the risk before the risk results in an actual incident. So rather than tracking incidents and then going backwards in time to try to identify what the root cause of the incident was, we identify the root cause before the incident occurs. And I think, to me, that's the most exciting aspect of how we can use AI in healthcare within an industrial setting. So the key here is shifting our mindset from not just monitoring individuals, so actually learning from their behaviors and creating systems that, in an anonymous way, again, to protect privacy, identify patterns that we need to pay attention to. So when data is used to improve the overall environment, rather than just evaluate individual people, which is where the privacy issue becomes a concern, then trust goes up and outcomes improve. And that's the nature of healthcare, generally speaking, whether we're looking at an industrial setting, industrial hygiene, or whether we're looking at population, large populations and population health. It's a matter of how do I give people insight that will help them create behaviors that are going to be beneficial to their safety and their well-being. And OEHS professionals can play a critical role in drawing sort of that ethical line, where do we cross the line into privacy concerns, and in defending it, while also helping to identify these patterns that help us to mitigate and alleviate risk.
I couldn't agree with you more. Now, you wrote an article from Inc.com called "Do These Three Things to Get Over Failure," in which you talk about how failing is part of innovation. How can the OHS industry apply that mindset responsibly without increasing risk to workers?
Yeah, I love that question because there are some very specific answers here that I'll talk about in my keynote. So failure in OEHS, it never means risking lives. That's the last thing we want to do is actually risk the well-being of the individual. But that doesn't mean that experiments are off the table. And here's why. With AI, what you can do, and what I talk about in that Inc. piece, which is not AI specific, by the way, it's just how do you deal with failure in general, but the same principles apply. Number one, create a sandbox, create pilot programs that allow you to test ideas, risk mitigation approaches in a sandbox where there's a safe space, where it's not going to have implications on individuals in a real world environment. And here's where AI plays a very important role. Do simulations. What AI allows you to do is to simulate an action to see what impact it will have, identify the cascading effects of that action, and see if, in fact, that action results in a better outcome. So imagine being able to simulate with a digital twin an industrial setting and the implications on safety, on health, of any particular change, any dial that you tweak in that industrial setting, and do it entirely in a simulation. I mean, that, think of, if, by the way, to use a very trite example, think of, flight simulator. What I joke about is that every commercial pilot has suffered a catastrophic incident where the entire plane has been destroyed. Every single pilot has, because they've done it in a simulation, right? The reason they can fly an aircraft and they're comfortable flying an aircraft into unknown conditions is because they've already done it in simulations. So what if OEHS professionals could do the same thing? Use a flight simulator to identify where actions will have implications and where they can use those simulators to test an idea or an innovation without creating any risk in an industrial setting. And the last thing I talk about in that article is what I call learning loops. Learning loops are ways in which we incorporate knowledge before an incident happens, not after. So simulation creates learning loops by which I can build this ecosystem of knowledge that allows me to have enormous license and latitude in terms of how I better understand the organization and the implications of my actions on it. So I think it's a fascinating area for this audience to think about, and a way for them to innovate in a very safe manner that doesn't put at risk any assets or any individuals.
Struggling with the science behind odor detection, threshold values, and their practical application? AIHA University is hosting odor thresholds in practice, tools, science, and case studies for IH and OEHS professionals. Earn 3.5 contact hours at this live virtual PDC on February 25th.
In your experience, what leadership behaviors distinguish organizations that successfully integrate new technologies while maintaining strong health and safety performance?
So, I mean, leadership is one of those topics that's perennial. I've thought about it and written about it and looked at leadership as a fascinating space for me with respect to this audience. First, great leaders give us the opportunity, the space to slow down our decisions when the stakes are high, even when technology is trying to speed them up. So a great leader gives you this protected space within which you have license to make decisions and you feel comfortable making those decisions. How does a great leader do that? Well, number one, they give you some license to fail. They define what an acceptable failure is. So going back to what we were just saying, my concern always, especially if I'm focusing on safety, is I can't afford to fail. I understand that, but you also can't afford not to learn. And learning implies, it almost requires failure. So how do I, as a leader, give you a protected space within which you can fail? Do I create a sandbox? Do I give you simulation tools? But a leader has to give me that protected space within which I can experience acceptable failures so that I can learn over time. Secondly, great leaders invite dissent, and they invite dissent early. One telling factor of a leader who's not great is one who he or she shuts down dissent immediately. That's not great leadership. We've been led to believe that that's kind of like the wartime leader is the general who gives an order, everyone falls in line. That might work on some battlefields. I'm not sure it even works on battlefields today. But in organizations, you have to encourage dissent and treat it with respect and give it the time that it deserves, especially from a safety and an OEHS perspective, right? So that's the second thing. The third thing, and this is one of the soft ones, but it's so important. I see it always in great leaders, is great leaders model humility. They're willing to say, we don't fully understand this yet. And it's surprisingly rare among leaders to find that, but it's incredibly powerful. A truly authentic leader is okay, he or she is okay saying, we don't fully understand this. What do we need to do to unpack it and to understand it better? And strong safety cultures, I think, embody a lot of that. They don't come from certainty. They come from how do we navigate uncertainty and how do we create the curiosity as well as the accountability to be able to become a learning organization and over time to take dissent and different opinions and the friction that creates and turn it into a safer, healthier environment for our organization and our people.
Absolutely. So let's look into the future for a second. If you could offer one piece of final advice to OHS professionals tasked with protecting workers in an increasingly complex, tech-enabled world, what would it be?
That's a simple one. Don't shrink or shirk from your role. Expand it. Your role is not being minimized. It's not being discounted. It's not being marginalized. It's not being commoditized. It will expand. The future is going to bring enormous uncertainty along so many different vectors, so many threats. And I think the future of OEHS isn't just about protection. It really is about creating foresight, creating that anticipatory mindset that we talked about. And I'm speaking to the audience directly, you're increasingly the translators between technology, leadership, and human impact. You have to rise to that occasion, take that mantle and run with it. And if you can help organizations just ask better questions earlier, before systems harden, before habits set in and harden, then you don't just prevent harm, you actually create healthier, more resilient workplaces. And that to me is a future that is worth designing and a mantle worth carrying.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to learning more from you in New Orleans.
Alejandro, you're so welcome. Thank you.
Tom will present the closing session of AIHA Connect 2026 titled The Future of Work on Wednesday, June 3rd from 3:30 to 4:45 p.m. Central Time. To learn more about his presentation and register for the full conference experience, visit aihaconnect.org. That wraps up today's episode of the Healthier Workplaces Show. To learn more, visit the AIHA website and follow us on social media. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, remember that healthier workplaces mean a healthier world. Until next time.